What's going on, guys? So this podcast is a little bit different. Chewy wanted to kind of interview me, I guess, so we did kind of a role reversal. He wanted to kind of pick my brain about injuries and injury prevention and just my take on a lot of injury stuff that I've dealt with in the past, just to, pick my brain and see what I thought would help, you guys and myself even stay on the mats and train consistently and with less injuries, and just kind of my take on stretching, exercising, and maintenance work. So interesting podcast, a little bit different than the other ones. I hope you all enjoy it. It was a blast to do. Chewy's obviously, his jiu-jitsu knowledge is off the charts, so it was really fun to, talk jiu-jitsu with him as always. So hope you all enjoy the podcast, guys, and thank you.
Today we are going to talk about injuries, prevention, injury prevention, injuries, just everything related to training, trying to keep yourself healthy, and all that good stuff.
How's it going, guys? Like Chewy said, I've been training for about 9 years. Deal with some injuries in my day, like anybody else, but I've been training, Chewy, the majority of my jiu-jitsu career, I guess, and it's been awesome.
So, Eugene, because obviously you're a PT, so you deal with people that have injuries, and, you've helped me through, numerous ones. Pretty much every injury that I've had since you've been at the gym, you've helped get me through it. What are some of the injuries that you've experienced personally?
Well, just being new to jiu-jitsu, you don't always know when to tap, when to say enough is enough. So I've broken my thumb. I have dislocated my ankle. I have, obviously back injuries, neck injuries, numerous ones of those. Broke my elbow, my ulna, I guess, my radius, fractured my radius. It was a really probably the longest recovery I've ever had, being out of the gym. But I think there's probably more stuff, and you always banged up, injured fingers, that kind of thing. So.
And so, kind of for me, I've seen people kind of ask this question, and I think we all ask it at some point. Why do you keep training if, you get all these injuries?
It's a double-edged sword. You got to think, if I don't push my body, it's just going to decline, I feel like. Mm-hmm. It's going to decline faster. So that's where coming in and training smarter is the key. But, yeah, I think the juice is worth the squeeze.
Okay.
If you will.
Maybe.
Is that correct?
Sounds correct.
So what that means is, it's worth, the risk is worth the reward that I get from jiu-jitsu.
Fair enough. I
get a lot of mental and physical benefits from it, strength, endurance, cardio, that kind of stuff. So, I think it's definitely, and the better you get at jiu-jitsu, I think the more you know when you're in a bad situation. Sure. I think injuries actually, may be less prevalent, yeah. I think.
I was listening to a interview with a guy named Chris Moriarty, who's also a doctor, and he was talking about how a lot of times he feels like people get injured when they don't know kind of when to let up off the gas. When you're rolling, when you really try to muscle through or push through something, or when to fight through something, you don't tap. And then as you get a little bit older, a little bit more wise, you kind of say, okay, man, I'm done. Tap, or you kind of maybe you're going for a sweep and you're really extending your leg out. You're like, no, I'm not going to go for it. You can kind of ease up on it and prevent that stuff. So, jumping right into it, just for people listening, we'll talk first about warm-ups. So, over the years as an instructor, you kind of tweak the classes and you try to figure out what's the better way of doing it, what's the best way of doing it. From your standpoint, because again, I have things that work for me personally, but I don't know all of the stuff behind it. It's pretty much I go off of how I feel, how other people feel, that kind of thing. What do you think is a good way of warming up, before jiu-jitsu? Do you think stretching is the way to go? Maybe a dynamic warm-up of some sort where you're doing a lot of different movements and short stretches where you're just moving in and out of, stretching and things like that? Or do you think that drilling techniques to get warmed up is the way to go? What's your thoughts on that?
I think it's definitely a loaded question. First of all, there's not a one size fits all. Not everybody's in one category, but the thing with, everybody used to do static stretching, holding 20, 30 seconds, holding a prolonged stretch, prolonged hold. And that's good per se for certain areas, but I feel like that can at times, you have stretch receptors,
Okay.
In your muscles and kind of in your ligaments. Basically, those stretch receptors respond to protect you from overstraining or over moving the tissue, I guess. So basically, if you hold a stretch for too long of a time, that can put those stretch receptors in a state of relaxation so they don't fire when they're supposed
so you
to.
can actually overstretch.
Yeah, so like stretching after activity is great because it kind of relaxes your tissue a little bit, but either a dynamic warm-up where you're going into the stretch for holding maybe 5-second holds and then relaxing, or like even flow rolling or just warming up, just doing dynamic, just movement. So what I think helps a lot is, areas in jiu-jitsu where you think they would get tight. So some areas that I feel like in jiu-jitsu that probably get tight would be the pecs, the groin area, the adductors, like the inside of the thighs, the hamstrings, because a lot of the positions we get to very rounded, kind of closed in, kind of minimizing space. So pecs, adductors, hamstrings, even hip flexors.
Well, I know that when I had a shoulder impingement last year, actually it's been about almost a year and a half ago, I remember, I went and saw Mish, your wife, and she did a massage. And I remember I came in there and said, the back, it was like my shoulders, my subscapularis, so there was a pull there. And so I went in there and I was like, hey, my shoulders are kind of tight. They're messing with me. And she spent the majority of the time on my pec, like digging in there and loosening it up. And I remember I left from that massage, like there's no pain. And I remember talking to you afterwards and like, man, like, look, then once you think about it, it makes perfect sense. We spend so much time sort of curled up with our shoulders rounded and our pecs and our biceps contracting and pulling in, staying tight, gripping things that, we have to loosen that thing up. And because when your pecs pulling in, when your shoulders are rounded, you get into a really bad position structurally for your shoulders. Right.
Structurally for your shoulders, neck. So you're looking at, the way that I kind of educate my patients is we're going to strengthen what's weak, stretch what's, what's, tight.
So what are some things, so if we're talking about, like, let's say the shoulders, obviously we know sort of like the culprits are the pec and stuff. What are some things that people could do to obviously, strengthen the back there and then loosen up the pecs?
So, I mean, for example, so as far as, a stretch for the pecs, like a doorway stretch or something kind of at the wall, getting the bicep / pec there. And then after, stretching out the pec, you want to look at strengthening the dorsal scapular or shoulder blade musculature. So what you're looking at, kind of like tees or row, Theraband, or monster band, like kind of band pull apart and make sure squeezing the shoulder blades together. That because the shoulder blade musculature is really important in stability and function of the shoulder itself. So those are really neglected a lot of times, and they're really important in your shoulder itself functioning properly, seating in a good position.
And so what we'll do, because this is probably really tough to explain through audio, because you can't, and for you guys listening, you can't actually see what he's talking about. So what we'll do is we'll put together a video of some different techniques that you can use to loosen up some of the different parts of your body, like your pecs, hamstrings, hip flexors, things like that. The big problem areas that most of us have at some point or another. So we talked a little bit about, warm-ups and things like that, and kind of we sort of segued into sort of general injury prevention. What are some ways that you think, because obviously you've been training for a long time and you have a deep understanding of how the body works and how it's all interconnected, what are some ways that you can counter sort of just the counter injuries or just prevent them before they start? What would be some tips that you would probably share with someone?
I think just basically recovery, overtraining. Those are things that, are preventing overtraining, making sure that you give your body enough time to recover, diet. I mean, there's such a gamut of so many things. But listening to your body, there's not a specific number. So you should train this many days, or you should train this many hours.
It's different for everyone.
Right. It is based on your age and how your body feels. Some days you may feel flat, and if you feel like you don't have as much energy, then you got to listen to your body in that instance. For me personally, I do jiu-jitsu about 3 days a week, and then I'll train with weights or cardio type stuff 3 days a week, and I'll have a day off. Mm-hmm. And I don't train usually jiu-jitsu 2 days in a row because I need my body to rest and recover the next day. And I think that for me helps alleviate some of the soreness and some of just my muscles feel better. I feel more sharper and more I guess in tune, more kind of.
The way that I think of it is I say crisp. I feel because for me, I have it's something I have to really watch because it's with what I do, it's easy to overtrain because I'm always there on the mats. I can always train. It's always there. And anymore, I don't really get much muscle soreness. I'll get joint soreness, my joints get tight, or my body feels fatigued. I'll feel sluggish the next day if I train too much, or maybe if I train 3 days in a row or something, I feel sluggish. So what I've done now is I'll train hard. One day will be maybe a 1 or 2 day session, but I'll have 2 pretty decent rolling sessions, and then the next day a lot of times will be a lighter day. So I might work out a little bit, and then instead of just doing rolling, I might just do some drilling of some sort, right? To kind of it helps me kind of get the blood flowing, but I still stay moving with the guys and stuff on the mat. And then, eventually some days I'll just take a complete day off. But I've noticed that since I've sort of dialed back the training, since I'm focusing on the drilling more, I feel like I'm actually sharper when I do move. Right. And then by giving myself some time to rest and sort of even let those techniques sort of assimilate into my body and let my central nervous system just rest a little bit. I feel like when I step on the mat after that, I feel so much sharper. I feel so much better. I don't feel lethargic at all. And I feel like when, my body just, it's doing what I'm asking it to do. Whereas some days if I try to train through that fatigue, I get on the mat and I just feel awful. And you know what I mean? And it's not a good training session. I could have got so much more out of it if I would have just rested.
I think the key is you rest, but it's an active rest. So the rest that you're doing is you're still getting that blood flow. You're getting that circulation. You're getting that muscle memory. You're not completely disconnecting. You're still in tune with your body and what you're doing, and you're recovering through movement, which is you're promoting blood flow and circulation, and you're allowing those joints to kind of loosen up. So I think just because you're resting doesn't mean you have to go home and sit on the couch and do nothing.
Right.
A rest can be, an active rest or light drilling, light rolling, light position work, anything. Even, getting on the rower and rolling really light, just
doing some yoga or something.
Some yoga, all that stuff is just you're resting, but it's so important to not just be done with your training session and go home and do nothing.
Right.
And, you get stiff and you get sore. And so to alleviate that stiffness and soreness, to kind of help your body kind of ramp down, you have to kind of do some active rest, active recovery, staying hydrated. All those things are crucial.
It's funny. You were saying that don't just rest. I remember there was when I tore my meniscus cartilage 2 years ago, and I remember I had surgery and had to rest, and I couldn't really do a whole lot. I remember it was on day 3, right? Where I've been sitting around. I remember my back and my legs and just everything felt awful, right? And it was things that weren't hurting before, they felt, especially my back. My back never really hurts. I was why is my back so damn stiff? And it was because I wasn't moving. And I remember I started getting out and I started just doing some really light stretching and movement stuff that I could do with the leg as it was. And I remember I felt so much better from that afterwards. And then when I got back to the gym and I was just moving around and going through the motions very slowly, I felt so much better overall because of that. And so you were saying kind of on your days when you don't train jiu-jitsu, you do lifting. And, there seems to be this kind of a debate in the jiu-jitsu community, where I've seen, because again, everybody's pushing their everybody's pushing their sort of agenda. You know what I mean? Like, you should lift this way, you should lift that way, you should do exercise this way, blah, blah, blah. So whatever. For me, I've always lifted weights. I genuinely enjoy just lifting weights and broing out, putting up some weights. I enjoy it. But I think that for me, and again, I'm going completely anecdotal, and I'm going from my own experience, and you can kind of share what your thoughts are based on having that knowledge of the body. I feel like that lifting weights over the years has protected certain parts of my body from injury. Whereas I see guys that don't lift weights that aren't as strong or aren't as muscular, and I see them being very prone to injuries, like things like for instance, like hips, like being like popped out of socket or something because they're actual they're hypermobile, right? Instead of being like where I might be a little bit stiff sometimes, and these people are like so mobile that like stuff gets whacked out of joints, or whacked out of place. What is your thoughts? Like, should you lift? Is lifting good? Like, what are your thoughts?
Oh, I mean, of course. I mean, I think anything you can do to supplement, you can lift, to complement your jiu-jitsu. You can lift, just strengthen certain, I think that complex movements, things that are like, maybe things that simulate jiu-jitsu, explosive movements, those are great, but it's also good to, say you want to work on some certain strength, shoulder press, or you want to work on your pec strength, or just kind of, being able to bridge or push somebody off of you.
Sure.
All that stuff's crucial. I mean, it's so, I don't think one way of lifting is right. And I try to do some explosive movements. I try to do some, balance training. I try to do, go play some basketball, anything, that kind of stuff, that jumping, that movement, that explosiveness is going to help you. That's a whole other category of lifting. Sure. And I think it's good to do, squats and deadlifts and, cleans. But it's also sometimes good to do some bench press and some pure, bicep curls, because it can protect those muscles. Being stronger helps protect your joints, and also keeps your joints lubricated, helps with the, synovial fluid and all that stuff. So I think it's definitely, and not one way, like I said, not one way is right. Don't, this is not like the way to do it. Right. You have to see what your body does best. And like, for example, me and you were talking before we started the podcast, I talked about Chewy, when you were younger, I remember we would constantly, and you were training for fights and stuff like that, but we would constantly have injuries pop up more frequent, and some of them would be more severe than others. But
I was hurt pretty often though.
Yeah, and
there was always just something going on.
Yeah, and it was, but I think now that you've modified how you train, you've trained smarter. You still get the time on the mat, but you're sharp when you train. You're explosive. And when you don't train, you're still mentally kind of going through the paces, and you're still on the mats kind of going through the motions. You stay like muscle memory. Your muscle memory stays sharp. So when you do start, really getting in there and rolling hard, you're still, crisp, like you said.
Well, and for me, going back to training smarter, one of the things that I had to let go was, because I lifted weights because I enjoyed them. So I just enjoy lifting weights a lot. And I had to kind of let go. I'm still like, I'm not a weak person by any means, but I had to let go of that. I've got to be like, throwing up as much weight as I humanly can. Right. And I had to kind of let go of that. Like I'll still rep out, like I'll still do a max from time to time to see where it's at, but, for me, a lot of it's been more of like, okay, what's going to benefit me on the mats more? Like, for instance, I switched my deadlift a while ago to, I still do conventional from time to time, but I actually do sumos more often.
Right.
And the reason being is because it's forcing, because, obviously my hips like want to go in all the time. Right. So it's doing the opposite. It's like trying to force them out. You know what I mean? I'll do some different, I'll do a lot of band work before I do like squats and stuff like that. And even like on days where I'm doing an active recovery, I'll do a lot of things that are basically countering some of the negative effects that I feel in my body from jiu-jitsu.
Right.
And those things have made a big difference. Like I remember I would get, my big problems, I would have shoulder issues.
Right.
And I would have, my knees would be really tight. Doing the different yoga and the stretching, like at nighttime, a lot of times it's helped my knees. And my joints feel a lot more just loose and at ease. And then like the band work where I'm doing all the exercises where I'm forcing my hips out and using these little, like what is it, the medial glute?
glute med, and max and all that stuff.
And like you turning those on, it seems to help my hip flexors. My hip flexors don't they don't have the same like tension that they have.
Your glutes and your hamstrings are not those are big, strong muscles, and they're not at the mercy of your quads and your hip flexors and all that stuff. So basically, you're not really working. If you're using a band for somebody like you, as big, as strong as you are, using like a small Therabands, it's not really going to do. You can isolate some of those muscles and get a little burn, get a little lactic acid stuff, but really, I think it's more neurological. You're getting that kinetic chain. You're getting those muscles to fire in proper sequence. You're getting muscles to activate like they're supposed to. Okay. That's the key.
So by getting them to turn on properly, to say, hey, now function like you're supposed to function.
Right. And then you incorporate that into strong lifts, those sumo deadlifts.
Right.
And, you're almost putting yourself in a position where you're going to, more often than not, allow those muscles, force those muscles to work. And that's going to make all your other muscles, work better. Everything's going to function better optimally. I think it's, in jiu-jitsu, structure and function kind of, certain things are going to adapt certain ways. If you're doing a squeeze, you're doing a triangle choke, or, you're doing an arm bar, you have to really contract those hamstrings, contract those adductors, really squeeze and keep tight. So if you do that all the time, you're gonna
you don't do something to counteract that.
Right, you're gonna overpower. Right. Certain muscles are going to get overpowered, and they're not going to be able to function, activate like they're supposed to.
You get hip flexors the friggin' thickness of a rope.
Yeah, and the hip, and then you're just not mobile, and you hurt, and people sit all day and drive all day, and
which shortens them and everything else too, right? So
exactly, and so then you go in jiu-jitsu and everything's tightened up, and jiu-jitsu is great for your body, but it's also can be hard if you don't do the proper. Work outside of the gym.
Well, I think that, there's so many things that are good for your body, right? Like, but I think at some point when you take it past a certain point, or you don't supplement it with things to, again, like sort of counterbalance those other things. Right. Like, for instance, running is not bad for you, but if you run a lot and you don't do other things to you'll get like I've seen like guys really tight hamstrings from it. Their knees
are,
yeah. And then like for me, like I've done, started it last summer. I usually do it at nighttime or early in the morning. I'll do, some sort of yoga.
Awesome.
Sometimes I'll go to a place, sometimes I'll do it at home, but I'll go through a stretching routine, and I usually like doing it at night. I'll put on I'll do an audiobook, and then I'll just, go through the poses and stuff. And that stuff has helped me more, like, especially in places like my knees and my hip flexors and like even my back a little bit. Like it just loosens stuff up to where like, it's just not tight. It loosens everything up. And it's honestly, from jiu-jitsu is such a competitive thing, right? Like, doing some deep breathing and exercise and doing something that basically is going to sort of like be soft instead of hard. Like,
it winds you down.
Right.
It gets you in that, like your mind, the breathing and the stretching, the prolonged holds and kind of going into the motion, holding it. All that stuff is just mentally like telling your body it's time to kind of relax. And so that's why I think yoga before you train is not necessarily the best thing. Sure. I think you need to do something to kind of get yourself revved up, get yourself going. I think yoga after jiu-jitsu, awesome. Yeah. Because a lot of people they'll train and they'll just go to sleep. Right. And they wake up and they're stiff and sore. So I think if you do those things after you train, it's a good transition to, because you're not moving all night, most night. You're going to be sleeping and you're relaxing and recovering. And I think getting some of that lactic acid down, get those joints, some movement, some relaxing is really good. I think it's really, and everybody's different. Some people may feel more stiff, but I don't know.
I don't know. For me, I think there's even a mental, like I said, there's the physical component of like it loosens up stuff, and then there's also the mental component, like where, like you said, it lets your body relax, but it also just like, I don't know, man. Jiu-jitsu is just such a go, and even after like a hard day, like your mind, there's just like so much in there, and it just wipes it clean. And I feel like when you're at least, it helps me, even from work, like work and stuff. Like sometimes we get super busy at the gym and stuff like that, and just it lets me just turn all that stuff off, so that I can come in the next day and be like ready to just like go after it.
So, and the things that if I had the time, I would train every day. I wouldn't train hard every day to get better at jiu-jitsu. So what I do, honestly, I watch videos, I read books for jiu-jitsu, and that's what I do in my off time, on my breaks, because that's what I need, that to stay mentally sharp, because
mentally engaged, right?
Yeah, and I don't know, just I've gotten into really reading a lot of jiu-jitsu books, and just I watch videos and stuff all the time, because for me, I get enough. I feel like I get almost too much rolling. Like my drilling to rolling ratio is out of balance. Like I feel like I do more rolling as compared to not enough drilling.
Right.
And I love rolling. It's the fun part. It's like, it's getting out there and doing what you love to do and enjoying it. But the drilling is not always the fun part, but that's the meat and potatoes.
Right.
That's where
rolling's the dessert. It's fun. Drilling requires conscious thought. Like it's monotonous. You're doing the same move hundreds of times. But like you said, it's like the meat and I think of it as broccoli, right? It's the vegetables. It's the stuff that you need to take in. For instance, everybody knows they need to eat more vegetables, but they don't. But they're always happy when they did. And when you drill a technique, it's what you need to do. But sometimes you don't do it because it does take more work, conscious thought, and purposeful or, just more conscious training. And then, but when you do it, you're happy you did it.
One of the best feelings is watching or learning a technique, repping out the technique, and then when you roll, pulling that technique off just without skipping a beat.
Yeah.
And it's you've been trying, I've done that to where I've tried a technique and I haven't really drilled it enough, and I'm constantly thinking, and I'm just not as smooth, not as fluid, and then I drill it, and then I'm able to hit it, and it just feels so much better, because jiu-jitsu is one of those things when you're at a high level with people, you don't have time to think. You're going.
Oh, yeah.
When you're rolling, if I roll with you, I fall behind right away, because your grips, you're switching grips and you're getting control, and I'm constantly trying to fight off your grip and your position, and just, so that's kind of the thing. And a lot of that is muscle memory. You already know what you're doing 2 steps ahead of before you do it.
Well, it's your body. Your body just feels it. You started training when you were,
25 about.
25, so
25,
roughly 25. So your body obviously is a lot different than it was then. Obviously the recovery is different, and your body just doesn't respond as well. What are some tips that, I guess, and again, we probably covered these again, but kind of putting them back together. What are some tips that you would give to someone as they are getting a little bit older, or if they're getting into jiu-jitsu now and they are 30 plus? What are some tips that you would give to people for training, whether, again, with longevity sort of as the focus?
Well, one thing, when you start out, you gotta have great training partners, because when you're starting out, you don't know when to tap. You don't know really when you're in a bad position. So having a partner or having a gym that's got people that are wise enough to say, okay, I got you, I'm just going to let go of this. That saves you, number one. That's being a great gym. Yeah. But listen to your body. If you're hurting one day, or if you've tweaked something, and you're at jiu-jitsu and you want to do it, great. Drill. Say, look, I'm just going to flow roll today. Yeah. Don't go out there and then go with somebody that's going to crank on your neck, or going hard and then hurt yourself worse. Kind of look at the big picture. Just listen to your body. I mean, make sure you stretch, you stay, hydrated, you listen to your body. Starting out a couple days a week is great for jiu-jitsu, because you don't want to burn yourself out. You don't want to overload your mind, because it's mentally very, very taxing, because it's a lot to, body awareness, a lot to keep track of, a lot of positions and movements. And so, yeah, I'd say just listen to your body. Be, sparing with your, rolling's great. It's a good way to learn, but also the drilling is key. Yeah. And having great partners, great rolling and great drilling partners.
And, for you guys that want to drill a little bit more, because obviously we're saying drilling, if you don't have a ton of time to drill during class, because obviously if you go to a class that's, an hour to hour 30 minutes, there's only so much time that you can be devoted to pure drilling. some great times to drill are either during open mats. You can drill before class a lot of times. If you need to always talk to your instructor to see, right? But see if you can drill before class, see if you can drill after class. Even if you can just squeeze in an extra 40 to 60 reps after class, that's a lot. You think about if you go to class like Eugene does for like 3 days a week, you do 40 to 60 reps 3 days a week for a month. I mean, that's a lot of repetitions of, one particular technique. And one side note, Eugene was talking about staying hydrated. Do you, I started doing it a while ago, last year when I got, when I had like this little thing at the doctor. I went to the doctor because I thought I was having a heart attack.
Right.
And, you remember that? So I had like a little heart monitor on the next day. And it wasn't actually a heart attack. What it was is I was dehydrated and my levels, basically my electrolyte levels were out of whack.
Right.
So I was having these heart palpitations.
Mess your like sodium, potassium, exchange pump.
And so I started adding sea salt. Yeah. I'll put a little of the sea salt into my water throughout the day to helps. It seems to help and helps stay hydrated. When I went back and actually got my blood work drawn again, I'd been doing that, cleaned up my diet a little bit, and everything was right where it needed to be. And that seems to help me stay hydrated a little bit because I'll actually feel if I drink a lot of water without adding the salt in there, it's almost like it flushes me out. Whereas if I could drink a good amount of water but still add the salt in there, it seems to help me out.
I don't know a ton about that, but I feel like that's kind of on a person-to-person basis.
Well,
I think if you are basically every day you're getting a good sweat in for the most part, whether it's jiu-jitsu or whatever, you're getting a good sweat. So I think you're losing a lot of sodium and through your sweat. So I think that's for you, man. Whatever works. Even drink like some mineral water or something. Whatever.
Well, and the sodium, like the salt, pink salts have more than just sodium in there, right? It has trace minerals and electrolytes all in there, so you're not just getting just pure. It's not table salt.
Yeah, it's not like putting a bunch of salt in your food.
Right. Yeah. So, and then the last question I have for you, man, is, again, you are a physical therapist, so you have to, tell people to, hey, chill out, relax, whatever. But then I've also seen you when you were injured, and obviously it's hard to take your own advice. I've heard from several PTs that they're the worst about taking their own advice.
Yeah.
So what would you say to people about training through injuries? Again, obviously I know it's person to person always, but what are your thoughts on like trying to maintain some sort of training through like some sort of injury?
I'd say ramp up or ramp down based on how you feel. So, for example, I fractured my radius. I was rolling with a teammate and I planted my arm out and I kind of felt a couple pops. So I really didn't have a lot of elbow pain, difficulty bending my elbow, moving my palm up and down, that type of thing. So, get the proper medical care. Number one, go to the doctor and see what they usually give you good advice. And then if they say you can start, getting back into rolling or anything, just start slow. Mm-hmm. What I did was I actually would roll or I would drill with one arm, just because I just couldn't stand it anymore, and I had to get out there, and I was just a pain in the ass at home, and I needed my that was a rough time. It's mentally very difficult. So I would just try to stop by the gym and watch, and I would just slowly make sure your partners are aware. Yeah. Look, I've got this injury going on.
Well, like you said earlier, you got to definitely, when you're injured, you definitely have to be choosy about who you roll with. You can't roll with like the D1 wrestlers, right? You have to be careful.
I think just, if something hurts, don't do it. If you are, take the proper care outside of the gym, and if you want to start getting back into it, ramp up slow. If you're 100% or the doctor says you're 100% good to go, but you haven't been on the mats in 3 months, don't go out there and just go right away start rolling, because you're proprioceptively, your joints or your knee or whatever is not there. It can't respond because you haven't done that kind of stuff. So start slow. Like when you had your knee injury, start slow. You did some basic positions.
Oh my gosh.
You did some basic drilling. Well, and then you ramp it up, and then you start going for a little more. In some precarious positions, you start putting your knee in that and test it.
Yeah. Well, even before that, though, I mean, because you actually put me on my PT program after the knee surgery. And I remember, doing all the different like lunges and different steps and stuff like that to like get the muscles in the body to like actually do what it's supposed to do and get them used to it. And like you said, when I first got back on the mat, I started with very light drilling and light movement and just trying to remind those parts of your body that sort of got turned off. Like, hey, this is what we're doing again. Before you try to throw them like straight into the grinder of hard training again.
Well, in my defense, you're probably like a week out of surgery. You're probably like as far along as some people are 4 to 6 weeks out or 8 weeks out. So you were doing, your progression was once you were kind of healed, the tissue was, from the surgery, everything, the trauma from the surgery, everything was healed. You really.
So what you're saying is I'm like Wolverine.
You're like Wolverine. No, man. It's kind of like you're an elite athlete, so you getting to a level of where you need to be. You're still gonna have a long distance to go, but you start at a higher level, but you have to get to a higher level.
Sure.
But the other thing is you're aware of your body. This is your well-being. This is your livelihood. You're going to really be super aware of what you're doing and how it feels. So that's just kind of, and it depends on who you're dealing with. Some people don't care. They're like, oh, it's fine. I had the surgery. I'm good. But no, that's not. That's half the battle.
And that's what happened with my right knee, right? I was a young kid. I was I had it done when I was 19, and I did a little bit of PT, nothing crazy. And as soon as I like from surgery to a competition was like 6 weeks. Yeah. So stupid.
But it doesn't appeal to you. Like it doesn't, like a lot of therapists don't know what you do on a daily basis, and they don't really know how to transition you from everyday putting on shoes, socks, pants to being, in
the middle of a match.
In a match. Right. They don't know that. They don't know that transition. They don't know the positions you're in. That's why I feel like I have a kind of a unique advantage because I've been there and I've been injured and I know how my body feels.
Well, and you're also someone like I remember, when I broke my nose, the doctor asked Derek when he was picking me up from the hospital. He said, "Hey, so is he going to continue to do this stuff?" You know what I mean? Like as if like I had to like, and he was like, "Well, yeah, this is what he gets paid to do. He's he's an athlete, right?" Like, and it's just funny because from a medical standpoint, right? Like a lot of people, they want to like almost shield you, get you away from the danger, right? But like you said at the beginning of this thing, if you don't use your body, it's and the way I've thought about this before too is right. Is if you don't use it, it's going to deteriorate one way or the other. You might as well enjoy it, just be smart with it because it is a finite resource. And once it's used up, it's used up.
Yeah. And it's kind of finding a happy medium, training a good level. Cause if you train too much, you're going to break yourself down. If you don't train enough, or don't do enough with your body, it's going to break down. So you got to find that happy medium where your body, I guess, functions optimally. And that's, so there's a lot. It's kind of like, I guess when I drive my car, you get it to a certain speed where like you get the best gas mileage.
Right. Okay.
You get if you go too high, it works to your car. Your car works too hard. You don't get good gas mileage, or you're going really slow. You're not getting as much. So I think that's kind of where I feel like you kind of get that nice cruising speed, and you're just improving. And I think that's probably the best example because I just love driving in my car. I get that nice speed, and I can see the readout. It's like you're getting like 30 miles a gallon. You're just pumping your fist.
Fucking cheap ass.
Well, it feels good.
Cool. So that's all I had for you, man. Like again, I think that we covered a lot of stuff. We have some basic stuff on injury prevention. And guys, we're going to put together a video for some of you guys, just showing you some different stuff that you guys can do to sort of fight those big problem areas that we all have as jiu-jitsu practitioners, like the tight pecs and messed up shoulders, the hip flexors and the lower back, stuff like that.
Necks and ankles. And
so we'll put together some videos to go along with it, and we'll put those together with the podcast. Eugene, did you have anything else that you wanted to include in there, man, that maybe we missed? Because we covered a lot of stuff, I guess, going over to injuries and training and everything else.
Not off the top, but I'm, a resource for anybody. If you've got questions for me, I'll, get my email out and anything, I've been working with athletes for a long time. I feel like I'm an athlete myself to an extent. So, but I think there's always unique situations, and everybody's body is different. Just figuring out the best, getting the most out of it. So yeah, I mean, that's really it. one thing I just thought of actually, recovery-wise, things to do for recovery for different modality. And that's one thing we didn't really cover.
We didn't
cover that can be for another time.
We can go on a whole thing of recovery.
Yeah, like recovery-wise, using soft tissue massage or whatever. That's a whole other can of worms there.
Yeah.
Ice versus heat, all that stuff. That's a whole other debate. Those cryo chambers, that's another thing.
I use like ice baths,
contrast showers. Like those cryo chambers are huge now, and even those flotation tanks people are saying they get a lot of benefit from those. So that's a whole other can of worms, man. There's a lot that goes into that.
Thanks again to Chewy for joining me on the podcast and leading the Q&A, leading some questions, and I hope you guys got some great information. It's an older podcast we did a few months back, and it was just really fun to do, really fun talking to Chewy as always. Thanks again for joining us, and check out more podcasts on the Jiu-Jitsu Therapist page, and follow the YouTube channel and Instagram, Jiu-Jitsu Therapist. Thanks, guys, and we'll see you next time.